Okay guys, I think we need to talk. I've been waiting with this video until the end of the first test, but now our worst predictions have been confirmed, so let's discuss the details. So first of all, we have to talk about why do we have a new set of regulations in 2026, and not just any set of regulations, it's the biggest regulation change in the history of Formula 1, because we are changing the chassis and the drivetrain rules at the same time. So the first intention on the drivetrain side was to simplify the regulations to attract more engine manufacturers. And that worked because they could attract Red Bull/Ford and Audi and new old joiner Honda. So now we have 5 engine manufacturers instead of 2, because otherwise we would only have Mercedes and Ferrari left. On the other hand, we have a huge change on the aerodynamic regulation. And here the regulators wanted to create cars which create even more inwash, so they wanted to avoid outwash even more so cars can follow each other better. They wanted to eliminate the problems of the ground effect cars, so they reintroduced the flat floor. And in the end, as you could see in my previous videos about the flow fields and CFD and the aerodynamics of these cars and all the predictions we've been doing on this channel, that they are reintroducing old problems. On the plus side, we can say that the cars look quite pretty, they look very different, so we have a variety of different ideas and designs, and they sound better than before because the MGU-H is gone. But on the other hand, we also should keep in mind that the regulator's intention was to create fully defined regulations which don't leave any room for speculation, no gray areas and no loopholes. And they pretty much did exactly the opposite, and that is the shocking thing here, that teams find a lot of loopholes, a lot of areas where you could interpret the regulations in a different way, which is great for engineers and fans, but it's a huge problem for the regulators and the sport in general. They already have a lot of problems at their hands right now with the compression ratio discussion, and they promised to solve this for the first race, but it looks like they won't do anything about it. On the other hand, they also cannot really do anything about it because Mercedes, if they are doing things, they are always doing this in cooperation with the FIA, so they must have confirmed this before, so they can't deny it now. So it's a huge problem, and there will be more of these sorts of problems coming their way. So what are the problems in 2026, which we predicted before and which we confirmed now during the test? First of all, we have problems on the aerodynamic side and on the drivetrain side. On the aerodynamic side, the first one is less downforce. The cars have significantly less downforce, and the shocking thing is you can see it. You can see it on TV, you can see it in the onboards, even on push laps, and you see familiar corners in Bahrain, and suddenly you see how slow the cars are through these corners. The next thing is it's hard to follow, and we've been predicting this in my previous videos where I showed you the different flow fields and what's happening behind the car and in which wake the following car needs to drive, and we've been analyzing this for months and even more than a year ago, and now we could see the confirmation of this in the test. So it is hard to follow, and that just means that you follow another car and the gap stays the same, but it's also hard to get closer, or it's even harder to get any closer to the car in front of you, because if you do, you just destroy your tires. And the hope is that the drivetrain, the crazy drivetrain rules with the energy management would help with that. But we will come to that in a minute. And another problem is that we have a pretty extreme DRS train now. So DRS train was already a problem in the future. If a lot of cars are driving behind each other, each one of them has DRS, so they can open the rear wing. No one is getting by because everyone are at the same speed. So no one has a real power advantage or aerodynamic advantage to get by. And now, with these new regulations, they had to introduce this double DRS, which they call straight line mode, so front and rear wing go flat, otherwise the energy consumption of these cars would be too high on the straights and they would be even slower. So they created this DRS or this double DRS, and now if all the cars have always the double DRS, on every straight you will always have a DRS train, so no car is faster than the other, unless you do something differently with your energy management. And then on the drivetrain side, we saw extreme clipping. Clipping means that you are pretty much shutting off the electrical drivetrain, which in that case are 350 kilowatt. So suddenly you're not driving around with a 1000 horsepower Formula 1 car, you're driving around with only 600 horsepower from the combustion engine. And we've also seen super clipping. Now, what is super clipping? Super clipping means you're not just shutting off the electrical side of the drivetrain, you're actually recharging the battery with the combustion engine. And that means you're not driving around with 600 horsepower from the combustion engine, you're just driving around with between 300 and 600 because you're recharging the battery for the next straight. And then the battery capacity won't even be enough for that whole straight. You will run out of battery in the middle of the straight. And that is the next big problem. So the capacity of these cars, of the battery of the cars, did not increase, but the electrical power increased 3 times. So instead of 120 kilowatt, we now have 350 kilowatt. But the capacity stayed the same, so they are always running out of energy. And energy management is the new defining factor of everything. And that is a big problem because suddenly race drivers who are paid and cheered for driving full throttle cannot drive full throttle anymore. They always need to manage their energy. And before, the driver could make a difference. And now we could say with these new cars with low downforce and a lot of torque, the driver can make a difference. That's true, but only if he has enough energy available. So it's all about energy management. It's not about the driver or about the tire management anymore. Everything is just about energy management, and it's not even in the hands of the driver. There's a lot of software and even AI in the background, which is deciding on the best strategy, and pretty often the driver doesn't even know what he's doing there right now or what the car is doing for him there right now. So that is a huge problem, and also for the fans, because the fans from outside cannot see why this one car is fast and the other car is slow. You never know which complicated processes are currently running in this car. So it's super difficult to understand from outside, and it's not fun for the drivers. And as we heard from Bahrain, every driver was complaining about that. No driver likes to drive these cars because they can't just go full throttle. They always need to manage the energy. But there were only 3 drivers really publicly talking about it, and these were Verstappen, Hamilton, and Alonso. So the 3 world champions who can say what they want because they are there for a long time, and other drivers have to stick to their contracts or to their sponsors, so they better stay quiet on the record. But as we heard, off the record, every driver was complaining about that. Now, let's predict what will happen in the next months and years. So first of all, less downforce can be cured. We have to remember that this is Formula 1. We have a steep learning curve, we have extreme development speeds, and Formula 1 teams can solve a lot of hard problems in pretty short time. Less downforce will increase, that is not really a question here, but this will go hand in hand with more outwash, and that will make following even worse. So it will be even harder with the months coming to follow each other and also to get closer. So also that will get worse. They won't really increase that. On the other hand, this DRS train issue won't change because the regulators can't really deny the teams to have the DRS of a straight line mode anymore, because otherwise, if they cannot put the wings flat on the straight, their energy consumption will be too high and these cars will be even slower. Then the clipping. The clipping will get better, but I was coloring it in yellow here because it won't be by much. So they can only do so much because the capacity of the battery is limited. So you cannot get much better. But teams will find more efficiency, teams will find better strategies. They will also copy strategies from each other. People will move from one team to another, so they will equalize. It will get better, but not by much. And the same for the super clipping. For the capacity, this won't change unless they change the regulations. If they increase the allowed capacity for the battery, it means that the cars will get heavier. And what we wanted from these regulations was that the cars should get lighter. So that is a big problem. It won't change. And if the battery capacity doesn't change, we will stick with all these energy management problems. And also this won't change because this will always be the dominant, the primary topic of this generation of F1 cars. So can we predict what will happen in the future? it looks like Formula One will get into massive problems in this year. Not just on the micro level with all these little regulation interpretations and one team finding a loophole and all the others complaining about it, also on the macro level for F1 in general. We have very unhappy drivers, we will have very unhappy fans, and we will have racing which is not very enjoyable. The cars have less downforce, they are slower, they even look slower on TV, and people are only caring about energy management, which is something that the fan from outside cannot understand, and without fans the sport is nothing. So it looks like we will get or need new aerodynamic rules and also new drivetrain rules pretty quickly. The problem here is now that we have new engine manufacturers like Audi and like Red Bull who signed up for this set of regulations because they wanted to design their first own engine and then stick with it for at least 5 years. And they will not want to cut this short. So it's a pretty hard discussion with them to change the drivetrain regulations anytime soon, but the sport would need it. Otherwise, Formula One is having a huge problem and could lose a lot of its popularity. So basically, all these problems started with FIA not allowing front electric motors on these F1 cars while having this huge power split of 50-50. Because now they can't really recharge the battery fast enough during a lap. So should they allow front electric motors in the future in F1? Because that would allow them to keep the smaller battery. They would be able to recharge the battery much quicker. They wouldn't have to save so much energy because they would have a lot more energy available. And the good thing is also that if you have a combustion engine that only needs to produce 500 to 600 horsepower, you could allow the teams to use whichever combustion engine they want. If you limit fuel flow and so on to make sure that no one is making crazy things. But this could mean you could have a Formula One with 4 to 12-cylinder engines. The teams are free to choose. So what do you think about this? So let me know how you would write the future regulations which might come sooner than we expect them. Let me know in the comments below and see you at the next video.